Thank you for talking to me.
Sure. No, it's my pleasure.
I've always trusted, what you say about vaccines. So I with the MMR, I went to get her shot because I was just like, I'm just gonna do it. And she had strep. So that, I mean, I didn't know if it was allergies or what, but they just tested her. They were like, well, we can't do it today. Unfortunately, that gave me time to think and spiral. So do you know Tia Severino?
The name, yeah.
Okay, so she talked to me, and um, several people talked to me, and I'm like, I just need to hear it from you, I think. So somebody mentioned the story of like triplets that got an MMR vaccine, and then one stopped like babbling and talking later that day, and another like an hour later, and another an hour later, or around the same time frame, but within hours. What other possibilities could it be that somebody could react or just have that? Because I know vaccines happen at the same time life happens, but I can't, it's hard for me to process that.
So vaccines can cause side effects. Sometimes can cause serious side effects. Sometimes can cause fatal side effects. When they do that, it's because they've evoked an immune response that has caused those. So, for example, the oral polio vaccine could itself cause polio. But that was because the virus could revert to this kind of, neurovirulent type or paralytic type. And then you would make an immune response to it. You could cause paralysis. And same thing with Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is this kind of ascending paralysis that can happen maybe 1 in a million who get the influenza vaccine. But it's
I've heard
always
of
based on the immune response. And the immune response for something like measles, which is a live weakened virus, would probably take 7 to 10 days to develop. So when something happens immediately, it's really hard to ascribe it to the vaccine, unless it's like an allergic reaction to, one of the components, like if it was allergic reaction to an antibiotic in the vaccine,
it.
so the latex, that's used as a rubber stopper, but then when it happens that fast, you can't, it's very hard to blame it on the vaccine because it's invariably based on the immune. So the rotavirus vaccine in 1998, when it was taken off the market in 99, was found to be a rare cause of intestinal blockage, all based on the immune response to the vaccine. But that takes time to develop.
Okay, so I've always when somebody explained aluminum and polysorbate 80 and things like that, that helped me understand that they can't get past the blood-brain barrier unless they're at a certain amount. So I love hearing the science of it. So when you say it would take 7 to 10 days to develop some kind of immune response that would matter like that, um, are you saying there's like really nothing in the MMR that could cause that, like cellularly, unless it's an allergic, not cellularly, but I don't know the word I'm looking for, unless it's like an allergic reaction where they're, not getting oxygen or something.
Yeah, but see, it's hard when you get an allergic reaction. It's based on things like the release of histamine, um,
Yeah.
which is released by mast cells of the body, or this immunoglobulin E mediated response, which can be an immediate type hypersensitivity response. But I don't see that as causing like a loss of skills, like social skills,
Right.
speaking and stuff. I don't think that's how it would manifest. I mean, it manifests typically as hives, difficulty breathing, sort of swollen, area of the upper throat. That's how that would manifest. I mean, because you can get an allergic reaction, you get a serious allergic
Right.
reaction to vaccines, but it's immediate. It's like immediate, and it's not like loss of speech or developmental delays.
Then what would you like? I mean, well, have you, assuming this is true, what could possibly, how can someone look at that and be like that? I know it's not the MMR, but what could it be?
I think you said it earlier. I think it's an association. So my wife, I probably told you the story. If I have, stop me. But so my wife, who just passed a second ago, she was in private practice pediatrics. So she went on a weekend and was helping the nurse give vaccines. There was a 4-month-old sitting on her mother's lap, and while my wife was drawing the vaccine up into the syringe, the 4-month-old had a seizure and then went on to have a permanent seizure disorder, epilepsy, and was dead at age 5 of a chronic neurological condition. I think if she had given that vaccine, and she hadn't given the vaccine yet, if she'd given the vaccine 5 minutes earlier, and then the child had the seizure, and then went on to have a chronic neurological condition, and then died, I think that mother would understandably have thought, you know, my child is the victim of a vaccine. My child,
Oh,
yeah. So I think it's the temporal those temporal associations were always compelling, and it's very hard to argue against them, with like statistical data. But I think vaccines are really only designed to prevent vaccine preventable diseases. They don't design to prevent everything else that happens in life, and there's always those associations.
That's a good way to put it. Actually, I love that. I didn't think of it that way. But so, assuming Charlotte is not allergic to anything in the vaccine, is there anything like ingredient wise? Obviously, there's not, we don't have mercury or anything in it.
No, a
I
lot.
don't even know the adjuvant. Is there anything that can cause inflammation like to the brain right away in the vaccine?
No, it's so it's the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines are three live, highly attenuated, i.e. weakened viruses. That's what they are. They do replicate. I mean, and so what'll happen with measles vaccine occasionally, like 7 to 10 days after you get the vaccine, some children, it's rare, but it happens, can have a very mild rash and low-grade fever, which is basically like a mild measles infection. Mumps is really pretty benign, as is rubella, but the measles is the sort of the strongest of the three in terms of side effects. And sometimes you can get a lowering of the platelet count. I mean, so platelets are those cells in your blood that help the blood to clot, and it's called thrombocytopenia, which just means low platelets. And you get that like what looks like a shower of little broken blood vessels. It's transient, self-limited, doesn't have any long-term effects, but that we'll see that occasionally. But that's
Oh,
about it. I mean, in the scheme of things, it's a pretty safe vaccine. Remember, it's been out since 1968. So you've had about 60 years of experience with the vaccine. I think that
yeah.
something else at this point we'd know about it.
And she's 7, so if she felt weird, she could tell me. I also, there was something to do with somebody said we never get three diseases at one time, typically in real life, but that could cause inflammation. So, is that something like why did we? I think there was something in Japan. Maybe they used to split the vaccines up, but why did we combine them together?
Convenience. I mean, so the vaccine, the first measles vaccine was introduced in 63. The mumps vaccine was introduced in 67. Then the last best measles vaccine was introduced in 68, rubella vaccine 69. And then the three were combined in 71 so that you could get one shot instead of three. It's not
Yeah.
easy to do that, by the way. The reason, because what we would love, what I would love, is you just get one vaccine, all in one shot, right? Why not do it that way? And
Yeah.
the answer is because it's often true that the buffering agents or the stabilizing agents aren't compatible. So that's why they
Okay.
have to be separate. But in this case, they were able to make them compatible. And most of the things like that, I mean, the buffering and stabilizing agents are things like sodium phosphate. I mean, things that you're exposed to all the time, that we drink all the time. So it's not
Yeah.
agents that are generally regarded as safe. But I mean, these are live attenuated viruses. It's not. I certainly understand the hesitancy about that, but it's not a tremendous burden to your immune system. I mean, viruses are generally pretty small in the scheme of things, but so it's not,
Right.
and it doesn't really replicate that well. I mean, meaning reproduce that well. If you, for example, if you get natural measles, that virus will reproduce itself into thousands of times. Here, this virus is so weakened, it only sort of reproduces itself, maybe 10 times, 14 times, and then stops. So that you can get an immune response without having to pay the price of natural infection, which is a high price, by the way. I mean, that we had 3 deaths from measles in this country this year. When that equals the total number of deaths from measles in this country over the last 25 years. We had our first child death from measles this year. We haven't had a child death from measles in 2003. And we had 2 little girls die from measles in West Texas, one a 6-year-old, one an 8-year-old. It's just hard to watch. I mean, it's medicine has limits. There's so much we don't know. There's so much we can't do. This we know. This vaccine can prevent that. It could have prevented those 2 little girls from dying. It's just hard to watch.
I mean, so Charlotte got, I think it's called scarlatina. It's,
Scarlet fever, yeah, she has
and
scarlet.
I got her from school when she had the strep, a
She had a
week
strep throat
later.
and then she had a rash, strep throat and a rash.
Yeah, I thought it was measles and I thought it was too late. I mean, we had to go do the hazmat suit, whole testing and everything that the health department called me. But it turned out negative and it was from strep. They even listened to her lungs and they thought they heard something. And I just had that moment where I was like, oh my gosh, she has the heart condition where she has PACs, which I'm not saying that that would get worse with it, but I mean, I just don't know. Like she has a lot of sleep apnea, like central nervous system issues, so she doesn't always regulate everything well. So I feel like maybe if it's the weak virus, I feel like she's probably gonna get a rash because that's just my genetics. Like we react to things. Um, but how much more would she get? Like much sicker would she get with the real? I mean, with the measles,
Yeah,
it
it's
could be that.
a much sicker. I mean, measles, I'm a child of the 50s, so I had measles, as was true of everybody born before 1957. We all had measles, 3 to 4 million cases a year, probably 50,000 hospitalizations a year, 500 deaths a year,
Yeah.
primarily from pneumonia when measles infects the lungs, dehydration because measles causes not only high fever, but also diarrhea, so you can get dehydrated, and then encephalitis, meaning inflammation of the brain. Measles infects the brain, measles virus infects the brain. But measles vaccine virus doesn't because it's too attenuated. But when it affects the brain, when measles virus infects the brain, about 1/4 of those children have blindness or deafness. So measles was a frightening disease. And the thing that's most frightening that nobody ever talks about because it's not common, it happens in maybe 1 in 100,000 people that get measles have a disease that has the acronym SSPE, which is a chronic measles infection of the brain. So the measles, you get measles, you recover, then 5 years later, 7 years later, because of this chronic measles infection of the brain, you start to have personality changes, then you start to have loss of motor function, loss of sensory function, the handwriting starts to change,
Oh my
and
gosh.
those children die always. There's nothing you can do about it. It's like watching a child fall off the cliff in slow motion. I've seen 5 of those cases, and you see this and you think it's preventable, and it's hard to watch.
What is there any genetic? I mean, not that it makes the deaths lesser, but is there any genetic variable that would make you think that they would be susceptible to getting that?
Not that I know of, but always it's always a good question. But always it's true that if there, for example, was genetic predisposition to being say being more likely to develop fever or rash with let's say with a vaccine, then that's also means you would be more likely to have a severe measles infection if
That
you
was
were
my
infected with
thought.
a natural virus.
Yeah, like how much worse. So I did this may be an off the record thing, but I can't get the question answered. And I even brought it up to my old pediatrician that doesn't work there anymore. And he was like, well, I won't even like dignify that question with an answer because but so I just don't know. So I was born in Lubbock, I was raised in Lubbock. So the death at Covenant, that's where Charlotte went to the PICU. Um, what I had heard from, small town talk is that she had been in the hospital from being sick with, pneumonia or something, and then they vaccinated her with the MMR while she was sick, and didn't tell the parents, and then said she died of measles. Is that true at all?
No, not true.
Okay.
It really bugs me. I mean, it's so the doctors fortunately stood up and explained that this was an otherwise healthy child, a well-nourished child who died of measles and died of measles, so-called measles pulmonary failure, which is to say measles pneumonia. So
Okay.
measles causes pneumonia. That's what she had, a measles pneumonia. That's usually what children die of when they get measles. So I think there were people who swooped in from like Children's Health Defense and tried to sort of alter the story because I think this is not something that anti-vaccine activists want. It's like they're the dog that caught the car. When they are so successful at scaring people away from vaccines,
Yes.
now we're seeing children die from measles. Great.
It's so that's just not true. Like she caught measles and then caught the
And
pneumonia
died
from
from
the
measles.
measles.
Yeah, that's right. I think the other thing is, I'm trying to think how it's one's job is to protect your child, right? That's your job. Your number one job is keep them
Yeah,
safe. And the worst thing in the world is if ever they suffer or die.
absolutely.
I mean, it's the
Yeah.
worst thing in the world. The only thing worse than that is if you had something to do with it. And I
Yes.
remember there was a child who came into our hospital. This was 2009, swine flu pandemic. So the mother was a mother of 4, and she vaccinated her 3 kids with flu, and then she decided not to vaccinate her fourth because she thought
Ugh.
that child was vulnerable, and so the child got flu and then came into the hospital, was initially on face mask oxygen, then was on continued positive airway pressure, so-called CPAP, and then was on a ventilator, then was on an
Mm.
oscillator, then was on a heart lung machine for about a month and a half. And the child lived, but barely. And when the child lived, because there were periods of time where there was too low of oxygen in his bloodstream, he had some residual brain damage. So he was permanently brain damaged following, he lived, but he suffered brain damage. I remember talking to the mother afterwards and asking her how she put this all together. And she said, I'm glad I didn't vaccinate him because if I'd vaccinated him, it'd been much worse. And you're hearing this at the time, you're thinking, how can you say that? But I completely understand how she could say that because if otherwise, she would be taking responsibility for what just happened. It's too hard to do. I just think it's too hard to do that. To agree to admit to yourself that you were responsible for in any way hurting your child. It just can't. It's too hard. So I've seen it
Okay,
before. I get it. I understood that.
that makes sense. I mean, oh my gosh, you're making me want to take her today. Those like the anti-vax, the lies are very easy to fall for. I feel like I became friends with a lot of people suddenly on Facebook, and I browse, and you don't even think you're seeing these things, and then you're seeing them, and you're like, oh my gosh, it just kind of gets in your head. Um, what with RFK Jr. being in his position, do you feel like the measles will just get worse, or is it slowing down?
So first of all, thank you for saying RFK Jr. I am on call after call after call, and everybody always says RFK. He's not RFK. I remember RFK. I liked RFK. This is his son,
That's
okay?
great.
Thank you. Honestly, no one says RFK Jr. Me and you are the only two people who say RFK Jr.
Awesome.
So do I think it's dying down? So here's what I would say, assuming all things play out the way it normally plays out. In 1991 in Philadelphia, we had a massive measles epidemic. We had 1,400 cases of measles and 9 deaths in one city over a 3-month period. It was honestly one of the worst epidemics in the vaccine era
Oh my
ever
gosh.
in this country. And we were doing everything we could. We vaccinated down to 6 months of age. We isolated. We quarantined. We were running around with our heads cut off. And then it stopped in its tracks. And the reason was, up there's our dog. See our dog in the background there.
Oh my gosh, that is cute.
Um, and then it stopped. And the reason it stopped was May. But once we got to sort of late spring, it stopped because it's typically a winter spring disease. So what I predict is it will slow down. Although I also predicted that for SARS-CoV-2. I thought that SARS-CoV-2 would become like the other 4 strains of human coronavirus that circulated, would be a winter disease. But it's still year round, but it's still primarily, it's worse in the winter, is what I would say. So I think
Okay.
I predict May will stop, but it'll be back. And
It'll
when
be back.
Lubbock, are you in Texas now?
Yeah, I'm in the Dallas area.
Yeah, I would definitely vaccinate your daughter. I mean,
Yeah,
well,
because
because in the world of risk, I talked to Catherine Wells, who's from the Texas Health Department, and she said to me, the first time we knew that there was an outbreak in Texas is when there were 2 children admitted to a Lubbock hospital. That's the first time we knew. So when you knew that, so you knew it was the tip of the iceberg because most children aren't hospitalized with measles. Most children aren't hospitalized. So when the first 2 cases you see are hospitalized, kids assume it's a bigger iceberg. You're just looking at the tip. And she said she thinks that the outbreak probably started in November and maybe December, even though it was reported in February. And she thinks that because the Mennonites are a relatively sequestered community, they don't often interact with doctors. She said she thinks right now, although the CDC reports 1,100 cases, she thinks it's probably closer to 3,000 cases and maybe as high as 5,000. So this is bad. And if I do think it's going to calm down, but I still would get her vaccinated.
but if it calms down with RFK Jr. being, I mean, continuing to do what he's doing, it could rev right back up next
Yeah, no,
November.
it'll be back next. I can guarantee you this. It'll be back next year. I mean, in the pre-vaccine era, winter it was a winter spring disease, and every year 3 to 4 million children would get measles and 500 would die. That was
Oh my
always,
gosh.
and 48,000 would be hospitalized. So it happened every year. And then there was the vaccine. And with the first vaccine at 60, the first best vaccine, which was 68, dramatic decline. Then what happened was between 89 and 91, there were outbreaks of measles where you had 50,000 hospitalizations, 160 deaths in this country. And so the decision was made, let's have a second dose. But if you looked at the epidemiology of those outbreaks in 89 to 91, those were kids who'd never gotten vaccinated. So the reason we had a second dose was to give children a second chance to get a first dose. That was really the reason. So
Oh,
although it's a 2-dose vaccine, people will say that the second dose is a booster dose. It's really not. It's a second chance to get a first dose. We could have eliminated measles from this country with 1 dose. We could have if everybody got it, but and then the other reason was because the second dose, remember, is 4 to 6 year old. So that gives you a school catchment where you can then say that you can, say mandated for school. And that's what happened. By 1981, all 50 states had school mandates. And then there were these huge outbreaks in Los Angeles, Detroit, there was one in Alaska. And when they sort of enforced school mandates, then we eliminated it. But we eliminated measles from this country by the year 2000, gone. gone. The most contagious infectious disease of humans is measles. And let me tell you how contagious. This is why it's good to get vaccinated, is that for viruses like the COVID virus, SARS-CoV-2, influenza, respiratory syncytial virus, the reproducibility index or the contagiousness index is about 2 to 4, meaning I will infect 2 people during the day, assuming I'm infected and they're all susceptible. With measles, it's not 2 to 4, it's 18. And the reason is it's an airspace disease. It's not just, so you don't have to have face-to-face contact with somebody with measles. You just have to be in their airspace within 2 hours of them being there. When a child comes into our hospital with measles and goes to a treatment room, even after they leave, no one can go in that room for 2 hours. You have to wait for those little tiny particles that hang in the air like a ghost to settle. And it's that contagious. That's why it's amazing that we eliminated it by 2000. And that's why it's so scary that it's come back, because this is a hard virus to contain once it gets out there.
So if I got her, okay, so since it's slowing down, I'm trying to get her in this Thursday. So that kind of calms me down that I can probably not just
Would you do me a favor? You can call me every day after she gets that vaccine if you want, and we can talk about it. All right. If you have anything you're worried about, I'm happy to talk to you. Because my wife is in private practice pediatrics, and she does this all the time. She stands there and holds it because it is hard. I think it's hard to watch your child get a shot. I get it. So call me.
that would actually like seal the deal for me because I have such bad anxiety having like seen her almost die. So that would be like I just don't want to be Googling at 2 a.m. If she is weird after the shot, it would be awesome if I could just ask,
No, and if
is
it's
this
fine, we can
normal?
do this, and we can do like a WhatsApp call or a FaceTime call.
Yeah.
You do that. You have my number, right?
Yes, that really does seal the deal just to know I'm not gonna be alone, just panicking all day. I'm sure like after her polio shot, the first shot she ever got, she had more of an appetite. I joke about it than before and more energy. So I'm sure it's gonna be fine. But um does she need a second dose at age 7?
So she's getting her first dose at age 7.
Yeah.
I think not. I think
Yeah.
if she gets this dose, and then let's say there's huge outbreaks next year or the year after, she could consider a second dose. But the protective efficacy after 1 dose is 93 to 95%.
Oh wow.
Protective efficacy with that second dose is like 97 to 99. So it's a few percentage pickup.
Okay.
Which from a population standpoint makes a difference, but from an individual standpoint doesn't make a big difference.
Um Oh, you're gonna make me cry. Yeah, I just felt like alone, like I'm having to make this like big decision and I don't, it's so much pressure, but yeah, if I'm not feeling alone, I just want her to be okay. So,
No, it's
uh,
what everybody wants. I mean, I guess we all have our biases. My bias is I work in a hospital. So when we see kids come into our hospital with a vaccine preventable illness from which they suffer or go to the ICU or worse, it's hard and really hard. So that's why people like me get passionate about making sure it's vaccinated because we know what it looks like. We
yeah.
know what it looks like when it doesn't happen.
I think that's all my questions. I feel a lot better. I just wanted, yeah, I needed to know that there's really nothing that, apart from an allergic reaction and like a delayed immune response, that I need to really worry about. I know that they're not like, I know that people can be allergic and that things can happen, but when you said that if she's the type that could have a rash, like I think she could, then how much worse would it be if she got the measles? That checks out 100%. She would
I
be
think
killed.
when when you give a vaccine, that's something you've done, that you've allowed to have happen, and so they're being injected with these 3 live attenuated viruses. So you see that being done. If you do
Right.
nothing, if you choose not to get a vaccine, that is doing something, that is taking a risk. It's not a big risk. I mean, it's not a big risk, but it is a risk. I mean, we've had, especially in Texas. I mean, definitely in Texas, that's easy. I would definitely get the vaccine because you're in a state that's had hundreds of cases of measles, hundreds of cases of measles.
Right. And it's the
That's
whole
easy.
seatbelt thing. Even if you don't die, you could get hurt. I mean, like
Oh,
you
for
said,
sure.
deafness,
Measles make you
blindness.
sick. I remember when Jenny McCarthy was on Oprah. She would because she believed that the MMR vaccine caused autism, and she said, and she believed her son's autism was caused by the MMR vaccine, which 24 studies have now shown that's not true. But she said, quote, she said, I'll take the frickin' measles every time. And what that taught me was that it's not only that we've largely eliminated measles, we've eliminated the memory of measles. People don't remember measles. They don't. And we had a kid come into our hospital recently with measles, and there were a number of physicians that came up to me and said, I've never seen a case. And I'm thinking, what? It's like, because the 1991 measles epidemic, we had 1,400 cases and 9 deaths in our city. I lived through that. And I'm also of an age where I had measles. So everybody had measles. It's just amazing to me people haven't seen measles, but
Right.
they will now.
And if she had it, just picturing the scarlatina and just had that been measles, or picturing her now if she had measles, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. And if she lost her sight or her hearing, or not knowing for 7 years if it went to her brain, that's like kind of crazy to me. And just waiting,
So
that's wild.
scarlatina is really just strep throat with a rat.
Yeah, yeah. No,
That's
no, I mean, had that been measles, like
I
just
see.
thinking, had it been so much worse, I couldn't live with myself. I'm so thankful it wasn't.
Yeah, measles is pretty characteristic. It starts at the hairline, then it goes to the face, trunk, arms, legs, and there's also these little like grains of sand on the inner cheeks that
Yeah.
look like they're called Koplik spots, and that's pretty characteristic of the virus. Also, you're sick with measles. You're
Oh,
sick. You have your
it,
fever. I mean, you're photophobic, meaning you're intolerant to light. So when they ask me to come down when a child has a fever and a rash in the emergency department, I can tell in 30 seconds whether it's measles because children are miserable. The lights are down, they're
oh
down,
wow.
they're squinting, they're miserable.
Oh yeah. I mean, she was still playing around and stuff, which immediately the doctor was like, I don't think it's that, but because you have relatives in Lubbock, and we were in Lubbock off and on the past few months, so it's just um they tested just to be safe. But I just remember thinking, yeah, this would be something I can live with if this had been positive. Um, okay, I'm gonna do it for sure. I feel
All right,
like
good. But yeah, but call
so
me.
much
Honestly, if
better.
any questions, call me. I'm happy to talk to you about it.
Yes,
We'll talk the plane down. We're good.
yes, that actually makes so much of a difference to me, because I my anxiety is so bad about just all the things, and I know it shouldn't be. It's the whole. I tell people it's like the fear of the disease versus the fear of the vaccine. You got to like tilt the scale, and sometimes mine kind of tilts
Yeah, that
back
makes
and
sense
forth.
for we don't see the disease as much, even though there's probably 5,000 cases. There's still 300 million people in this country, so it's most people still haven't seen measles.
Right. So it's not in my face. I'm sure like if it were in my face, it would be just I'd still have anxiety about the shot, but it would be just so much different. I'm just already feeling that feeling of dread if I didn't do it and she got sick, and that's what's driving me also. So I can't
Good.
yeah, no. Can't do it.
No, I mean, America is not surprising you're completely vaccinated, but I never imagined they would get these diseases. It's too horrible to imagine. But
It's too much.
yeah,
Or
all
never
right.
hearing again or something. But yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for yeah, that makes all the difference. Now I'm not gonna be alone. I had a feeling you'd convince me because I trust everything you say. I really do. But I just, I let things get under my skin on social media the past month, and
That's okay. I mean, there's a lot of scary information out there. Most of
I
it's wrong.
I appreciate you taking the time, Dr. Offit.
All right, Heather, my pleasure. Keep it to see our dog's right there. There she is.
That was great.
All right.
Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye bye. Good seeing you.
Bye. You too.